with you. I can be sad with you.
Hi, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor Cast, and I'm a mom of 3. I have a 6-year-old, a almost 2-year-old, and a 3-month-old. And today I'm going to be telling you guys about my birth story with my 6-year-old. So my husband, who at the time was only my boyfriend, we had only been dating for about 7 months when I ended up getting pregnant, and we were 21, and so we were pretty young. And yeah, so my pregnancy was super easy. I didn't really have a lot of morning sickness, and I really just felt pretty great through his whole pregnancy. And so the day I went into labor, my husband had just worked a night shift, and the night before he had worked a night shift, and then he had gone into the city to get off his GDL driver's license. And then when he got home, we went for dinner, and when we were at dinner, I kind of had said that I kind of thought my water might have been leaking, but I didn't really think too much of it. And then once we got home, it happened again, and so I was like, okay, I think something is starting to go on here. So I called our labor and delivery at the hospital, and they told me to come back in. And we live about just under 10 minutes out of town, and so my husband was just like, or my boyfriend at the time, he was just like, oh my gosh, like, we were just in town, why did we have to come back home? So we went back in. I did a urine test, and they tested my urine to see if there was any of my water in it, and of course there was. So they're like, you're having a baby soon. So they had the doctor come in and do a membrane sweep, which started my contractions, because I was technically contracting, but I couldn't feel them yet. And so this was about, I would say like 7 p.m.-ish. And this was on, I guess, December 16th, 2015. So I was due on December 11th. So I was like almost, or December 10th, sorry. And so I was almost a week overdue with him. And so they did the membrane sweep. My contractions started like right away. We went home, called my mom, she came over, and by about midnight, my contractions were starting to get really bad. My body was just like shaking with every contraction. And so I'm like, okay, I think we should probably go back to the hospital. So we go back to the hospital, I get checked, and they told me I'm still only 2 centimeters dilated. And they usually won't keep you at the hospital until you're 5 centimeters. And with us living out of town, it being my first baby, I really didn't want to go back home. So I asked them if there was anything that they could do to help speed up my labor, and they told me that since they weren't busy and there really wasn't anybody else in the hospital giving birth, they would call the doctor and see if he would come in and break my water, because then they would have to admit. So I said, sure, that's fine. So this was probably around now 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. He came in and broke my water, and they admitted me into the hospital. I labored on my own for another 8 hours. And when they had come in to check me, I was still only at a 4, and they were starting to get a little bit worried. So they decided they were going to have to put me on a Pitocin drip. Well, my body was exhausted from being in labor for so long and just being in pain for that long with no progress, or little to none. And so I got the epidural, and that really slowed things down. And so they hooked me up to the Pitocin, and it still took quite a long time. I got super itchy after I got the epidural. I guess it's a side effect for some people, and I honestly could have ripped my skin off. It was insane. So they gave me some Benadryl, which was really nice. I remember I was talking to my husband, my boyfriend at the time, my husband. I was talking to him and my mom, because she was also in the room with us. And all of a sudden I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I feel so tired. And so I got to sleep for a few hours, which was really nice. So on the 17th, it was probably around 7 or 8 in the morning now. I hadn't eaten since the night before, and so I was starting to get pretty hungry. And so they let me have some toast with jam, which was really nice. Not too heavy, but just enough to kind of tie me over. So around noon, probably around noon on the 17th of December, I was ready to push, finally. My doctor, she was in a town over, and so she had to come from there when they called her that I was ready to start pushing. So it's probably about a half an hour drive from the hospital to where she was working in a clinic. She said she got to the hospital in like 10 minutes. They told her not to rush, first baby. Most of the time it takes a while for people to get their pushes right on their first try. So I ended up pushing for an hour and a half with my son, and we knew he was a boy before he was born, and so we were super excited to meet him. He ended up getting stuck on one side of my pelvis, and my doctor was starting to get worried that my hips wouldn't move enough for him to actually come all the way through the birth canal. But somehow I got him unstuck and I pushed him out, and he was a beautiful 8 pounds 6 ounce baby, and he was 21.4 inches long. He was my longest baby out of my 3 kids and my smallest baby, but he had a very big cone head because of how long he had sat in the birth canal for, just because my labor was so long and I pushed for so long. And I also hemorrhaged pretty bad after I had him. The first thing that I heard after he came out was that I might need a blood transfusion, and that was pretty scary because being my first baby, I really didn't know like how much blood loss was too much blood loss, or like how much blood you actually had to lose to need a blood transfusion. And so that was pretty scary to hear right after you just have a baby. And I ended up clotting on my own, and the bleeding had slowed down to a regular amount, so I didn't end up needing the blood transfusion, which was really great. We stayed in the hospital for only about 24 hours, and yeah, then we got to come home, and now he's 6.5, and it was overall it was a really smooth birth story. I didn't have too many complications, and the epidural went really well. I didn't have any complication from that, and it was a blessing. Even with being super itchy, I would not go back and change my decision on getting the epidural. I cried when I decided to get the epidural because initially I had wanted to give birth to him as natural as possible, and so when I finally caved and decided to get the epidural, I felt kind of defeated and that I had failed, but it made my birthing process so much easier, and I honestly would not change it for a second. And if you are pregnant and considering getting an epidural, I would 100% do it. That's the good stuff. So yeah, that's my birth story with my 6-year-old, and I'll be doing videos for my almost 2-year-old and my 3-month-old as well, but I'll save those for another day. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed my video. Bye.